A full bus, carrying a group of NYSC members who had just completed their year-long service in a small village, rumbled down a bumpy, dusty road. The bus was packed with young, energetic corps members, eager to leave the village that had been their home for the past year. They had spent long months working at the local high school, getting to know the villagers, and adapting to the peaceful, albeit isolated, lifestyle. Now, their time in the village had come to an end, and they were heading back to their respective destinations. Some were excited to reunite with their families, others were looking forward to the bustling city life, and a few just wanted to forget about the challenges of their service year. The atmosphere inside the bus was lively, filled with chatter and laughter. Corps members chatted animatedly about their experiences, remembering the funny moments, the struggles, and the bonds they'd formed with the people in the village. Most of them felt a sense of bittersweetness. It had been a year of hard work, but also a time of growth, learning, and making lifelong friends. But in the midst of all the excitement, something darker was brewing. A single, impulsive decision would change their lives forever. It all started with one man, Kwame. The village had always intrigued the corps members. From the moment they arrived, they could sense the deep traditions and rich history embedded in the village's fabric. The villagers had welcomed them with open arms, but there was an undeniable sense of mystery that surrounded the place. As the corps members spent more time there, they began to hear whispers of an ancient legend, the story of a golden crown that belonged to the village's royal family. The crown was said to be a symbol of the king's power and was protected by powerful spirits and magical charms. Over the years, many had tried to steal it, only to meet with tragic fates. One afternoon, after spending the day working at the school, the corps members decided to take a stroll through the village. The heat of the day had subsided, and the cool breeze made the dusty paths more bearable. As they walked, they stumbled upon the king's palace, a grand structure that loomed over the village. The gates were tall, adorned with intricate carvings that told the stories of the village's ancestors. The palace had an aura of mystery about it, and the corps members couldn't help but be captivated by it. But what truly caught their attention was a golden crown on display inside the palace. The crown was placed on a pedestal in the middle of a grand hall, and it seemed to glow with an otherworldly light. It was made of pure gold, and its shine was so blinding that it could be seen from the other side of the courtyard. Kwame was the first to notice it. His eyes widened in astonishment, and a greedy smile spread across his face. "Look at that," he whispered to the others. "It's real gold." The others turned to see what he was pointing at. The sight of the crown made some of them gasp in awe. But while some admired its beauty, others, like Zara, immediately felt a sense of unease. "That crown," Zara murmured. "I've heard stories about it. They say it's protected by powerful spirits and magical charms. No one who steals it ever survives. The village has sworn to protect it." Kwame laughed, dismissing her concerns. "Stories. Legends. It's all nonsense. That crown is worth a fortune. We could sell it in the city and make a lot of money. Think about it, riches beyond our wildest dreams." Suleiman and Ifeoma, two other corps members, looked at each other hesitantly. They were tempted by the thought of quick wealth, but they could still hear Zara's warnings echoing in their minds. "I don't know," Suleiman said quietly. "It just doesn't feel right." But Kwame was relentless. "Are you scared? If you're too chicken to do it, then stay out of my way. I'll take the crown and become rich." Zara stepped forward, her voice filled with urgency. "We shouldn't do this. This village is ancient. The traditions here are not to be taken lightly. If we take that crown, there will be consequences." Kwame ignored her completely, his eyes locked onto the prize. "You can believe in your silly stories all you want, but I'm not going to let this opportunity slip away. I'm taking it." The days leading up to the end of their service year were filled with mixed emotions. While most of the core members looked forward to leaving, there was still a sense of nostalgia for the village they had called home for the past year. But for Kwame, the village held nothing but a golden opportunity. The more he thought about the crown, the more determined he became to take it. On the last night of their stay, when most of the core members were busy packing and preparing to leave the village, Kwame decided to act. He waited until the moon was high in the sky and the village had fallen silent. No one would notice him slipping away in the dark of the night. Kwame wasn't alone in his plan. Suleiman and Ifeoma, still torn but ultimately swayed by Kwame's promises of riches, agreed to join him. The three of them sneaked out of their quarters and made their way to the palace. The streets were empty, and the only sounds were the distant calls of night creatures and the rustling of leaves in the cool evening breeze. They reached the palace and scaled the gates with ease. Once inside, Kwame's eyes locked onto the crown, which still gleamed in the moonlight, casting a soft glow across the hall. He could feel his heart racing in his chest. "It's even more beautiful up close," Suleiman whispered, awe in his voice. "Shut up," Kwame hissed. "Let's grab it and go before anyone sees us." Kwame hurried forward, his hands trembling with excitement as he snatched the crown from its pedestal. He tucked it quickly into a black nylon bag, careful to hide it from view. "Let's go," Kwame said, leading the way out of the palace. As they sneaked back through the village, the weight of the crown in Kwame's bag felt like a powerful, tangible promise of wealth and success. But little did he know, it was also a curse waiting to be unleashed. The next morning, the core members began to gather at the bus station, ready to leave the village. The sun had risen early, casting its warm glow over the village as the villagers waved goodbye, their faces filled with smiles and blessings for the core members. Zara, Ekimi, and the others were busy packing their bags when Zara noticed something unusual. Kwame had a black nylon bag clutched tightly under his seat on the bus, and it looked suspiciously like the one he had taken into the palace the night before. Her heart skipped a beat. She walked up to him, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "You didn't," she gasped. Kwame, who had been quietly smirking, didn't even try to hide the truth. "We did," he said, his voice full of pride. "And I'm not returning it." Zara's face went pale, her mind racing. "Kwame, you don't understand. This village, its traditions, they've been around for centuries. You can't just take the crown. The spirits will never forgive you." But Kwame only shrugged, his grin widening. "You can believe in your superstitions all you want, but I'm already rich. Once we get to the city, I'm selling it, and I'll never have to worry about money again. It's too late to turn back now." Zara tried to warn him one last time, but Kwame had already made up his mind. With that, the bus began to move, slowly leaving the village behind. The villagers waved goodbye, unaware of the theft that had just occurred. Some of the core members, like Kimi, prayed for protection as they set off on their journey. But Kwame and his friends laughed, taunting Zara for being overly cautious. The tension in the air was palpable, but no one could see the dark fate that had already been set in motion. The bus rumbled down the road, the dust swirling in the air as the vehicle bounced over the uneven terrain. The sun was high in the sky, casting long shadows of the bus across the red earth. The core members, exhausted but filled with excitement, joked and laughed about their time in the village. They shared stories of their adventures and pranks, reminiscing about the friendships they'd formed and the experiences that would stay with them forever. Kwame sat at the back of the bus, his back hunched as he kept the bag containing the stolen crown hidden under his seat. His mind raced with thoughts of the money he would soon make. He could already see the riches, the new clothes, a shiny car, a luxurious apartment in the city. The possibilities were endless. But as the hours passed, a sense of unease began to settle in. The once warm breeze through the open windows now carried an unsettling chill. Kwame glanced around nervously, his stomach twisting with. The next morning, after the quiet theft under the cover of night, the bus began its journey out of the village. The sky was clear, the sun already beating down from a high position, casting long, golden shadows. The villagers lined up along the road to wave them off, their faces warm with smiles and well-wishes, oblivious to the crime that had taken place under their noses. The bus hummed along the dusty roads as the excited corps members settled into their seats. There was a sense of excitement in the air mixed with a touch of sadness at leaving the village behind. Most of them had made new friendships that they would cherish for the rest of their lives. They joked, reminisced about the things they had done during their service year, and talked about the adventures that awaited them as they returned home. But while the others were preoccupied with conversation, Kwame remained strangely quiet. He sat at the back of the bus, his bag tucked tightly under the seat, trying to hide the nervous excitement that was bubbling up inside him. He could almost feel the weight of the golden crown, concealed within the bag, pressing against him. Every time the bus hit a bump, he felt a strange sense of unease, like something wasn't right. He tried to brush it off, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that the theft had set something in motion. Kimi, who had been praying for protection before the journey, sat quietly next to her friends. She felt a growing sense of dread as they traveled further from the village. Every time she glanced toward the back of the bus, she could feel her instincts telling her that something was wrong. She couldn't explain it, but she had always trusted her gut, and right now, her gut was telling her to be cautious. The bus hit a particularly large pothole, and a sudden jolt made everyone grunt in discomfort. The vehicle sputtered, hesitated, and then stopped altogether with a loud groaning sound. The driver cursed under his breath and began to climb down from the driver's seat to inspect the engine. The coppers muttered amongst themselves, exchanging puzzled glances. "What's happening?" one of them asked. "Bus is broken," the driver muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead as he opened the hood and poked around the engine. His frustration was palpable. It was as if the heat of the day was conspiring against them, adding to the tension in the air. The hours dragged by as the driver tinkered with the engine, trying to fix whatever had gone wrong. The corps members fanned themselves with their hands, the midday heat relentless as the minutes ticked by. Everyone was growing increasingly uncomfortable. Their minds, once filled with excitement about returning home, now began to wander. Some corps members started to joke to pass the time, trying to lighten the mood, but the restlessness was hard to ignore. No one knew it yet, but the delay was only the beginning. After hours of repairs and heated frustration, the bus roared back to life. The driver's face was glistening with sweat, but there was a visible sense of relief in his eyes. The engine, finally fixed, hummed steadily as the bus moved again, albeit with a slightly slower pace. The corps members let out collective sighs of relief. It was as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. The tension, which had built up during the long wait, began to dissipate. The bus continued down the winding, dusty road, the soft hum of the engine now accompanied by the chorus of the coppers' chatter and laughter. Kwame, however, still felt a gnawing sense of unease. He kept glancing down at his bag, convinced that the golden crown it contained was somehow causing all these issues. But no one seemed to notice anything unusual, and the bus journey continued on. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the heat began to feel unbearable. The air was thick with dust, and the landscape outside the window was dry and barren. The road was rough, filled with potholes and uneven stretches, but the driver pressed on, determined to make it to the next town. But then, just as the bus started to pick up speed, a loud, sharp pop echoed through the vehicle. The sound was unmistakable, one of the tires had blown. The bus lurched violently to one side, and several corps members screamed in surprise. The driver cursed once more and immediately pulled the bus to the side of the road. He quickly got out and began to inspect the damaged tire, his face twisted in frustration. "Not again," he muttered as he knelt by the blown tire. Of all the luck! It was clear that this was no ordinary breakdown. The situation was becoming more and more bizarre, and the corps members began to exchange uneasy glances. The earlier sense of unease had now turned into genuine worry. It seemed like they couldn't catch a break. The driver walked quickly, muttering prayers under his breath as he tried to replace the tire. The heat bore down on them even more heavily now, and everyone in the bus felt the oppressive weight of the day. But no one noticed the quiet bag sitting under Kwame's seat. No one saw the faint, almost imperceptible shimmer of the golden crown hidden inside it. Kwame, and now growing more nervous with every passing second, glanced around at the others. He noticed the way some of the corps members were nervously fidgeting, wiping the sweat from their brows. For a moment he thought he could feel the weight of the crown growing heavier, almost as if it was alive with a strange, unseen energy. He quickly pushed the thought out of his mind. The tire was eventually replaced, and the bus, though shaken, was ready to continue the journey. The bus resumed its journey, but now something felt different. There was a chill in the air, an unease that seemed to have settled over the group. The warmth that had once been comforting now felt stifling, and the wind that had previously been a relief now sent shivers down their spines. Kwame sat at the back, his bag still firmly pressed under his seat. He tried to remain calm, but the nervous energy was growing within him. He felt as if something was watching him, something powerful and ancient, just waiting for him to make another mistake. But he couldn't bring himself to stop now. The crown was his ticket to riches, and nothing was going to take that away from him. Suddenly, with a violent jolt, the bus lurched forward, throwing everyone off balance. The sound of the brakes screeching filled the air, followed by the driver's frantic shouts. "Hold on tight," he yelled, his voice panicked. But the sound of his voice was drowned out by the screams of the corps members as the bus swerved uncontrollably across the road. Kwame's heart raced. He clutched the seat in front of him as the bus careened toward the edge of the road. Time seemed to slow as the wheels skidded across the dirt, and everything around him turned into a blur of panic and chaos. The other corps members screamed, their voices a mixture of terror and disbelief. The bus swerved again, this time off the road entirely, and plummeted into a deep ditch. The crash was deafening, metal against dirt, glass shattering, and the cries of pain and confusion from the passengers. Dust and debris filled the air as the world seemed to tilt and spin. When the chaos finally settled, the world was eerily quiet. The once lively and excited bus had become a scene of devastation. Corps members, shaken and bruised, crawled out of the wreckage. But 3 of them, the ones who had stolen the crown, lay lifeless on the ground. Kwame, Suleiman, and Ifeoma had paid the price for their greed. The remaining corps members were left in shock and disbelief. The accident had been sudden and violent, but it wasn't just a random tragedy. It was a consequence, a warning for those who dared to defy the traditions of the village. The crown, hidden inside Kwame's bag, was the only thing untouched. But its power, its curse, had been the catalyst for everything that had gone wrong. And now, it remained a silent witness to the tragedy it had caused. The surviving corps members stumbled out of the wreckage, dazed and bloodied, their hearts pounding with fear. They tried to help one another, but the shock of the crash had left them in a state of disbelief. The once bustling bus had now become a graveyard of memories, filled with the echoes of screams and the quiet, haunting sound of the wind. Zara, Ikimi, and the others who had warned against the theft of the crown knelt beside the bodies of their fallen friends. Their faces were pale, eyes filled with grief and guilt. They had tried to warn them, to convince them not to touch the crown, but it was too late now. "This is our fault," Kimi whispered, her voice breaking as she looked at the lifeless bodies of Kwame, Suleiman, and Ifeoma. "We should have done more to stop them." Zara shook her head. No, we couldn't have known. But we should have respected the traditions of this village. The crown was never meant for us. The survivors gathered what they could, calling for help and waiting for the authorities to arrive. But deep down, they all knew that the curse of the... After what felt like an eternity, the bus was finally back on the road. The driver, having replaced the tire, climbed back into the driver's seat with an air of reluctant determination. The core members, exhausted from the delays and the heat, settled back into their seats. The mood was quieter now, as the earlier excitement of leaving the village had faded into something darker, a quiet, uneasy tension that seemed to hang in the air. The bus continued on its way, the road ahead just as bumpy as before. The dust kicked up in clouds, and the dry, barren landscape stretched out endlessly on either side. The sound of the engine was steady, but the heat of the day made the air inside the bus thick and stifling. Kwame, still sitting at the back of the bus with his bag tucked tightly under his seat, could feel a strange energy filling the air. It wasn't just the oppressive heat or the strange breakdowns that had plagued their journey, it was something more. The weight of the golden crown, hidden in the black nylon bag, seemed to press heavier and heavier with each passing mile. His palms were sweaty, and his heart raced nervously in his chest. Suleiman and Ifeoma, who had helped him steal the crown, were quiet now. They had started to feel uneasy as well, their initial excitement over the stolen treasure now replaced with a deep sense of regret. The air in the bus seemed thick, oppressive, and they could feel their spirits sinking lower with each passing mile. Out of nowhere, the bus jolted, its wheels skidding violently. A loud, screeching noise filled the air as the driver slammed on the brakes. Kwame's heart nearly leapt out of his chest. He gripped the armrest tightly, his knuckles turning white. The other core members cried out in alarm, but there was no time to react. The bus swerved violently to the left, then to the right, before skidding uncontrollably off the road. It felt like time had slowed down. Kwame's world spun, the sound of the bus's tires screeching against the dirt and gravel piercing his ears. He glanced around frantically, his heart pounding in his chest. His grip on the bag tightened. "Hold on," the driver shouted, his voice filled with panic. "Hold on tight." But it was too late. The bus plunged into a deep ditch by the side of the road. There was a deafening crash, the sound of metal twisting and shattering against the earth. Dust exploded into the air, swirling around the bus like a storm. The world around them seemed to collapse into chaos, the once constant hum of the engine now replaced by the sound of screeching metal and desperate screams. For a few moments, there was nothing but darkness. When the dust finally began to settle, everything was eerily silent. The crash had been so sudden, so violent, that it felt like the whole world had been thrown off course. The bus, now on its side in a deep ditch, lay in ruins. The windows were shattered, and the metal frame groaned under the weight of the collision. Inside, the core members lay scattered, dazed and injured. Kwame was thrown violently to the side, his body crashing against the window before landing with a heavy thud on the floor. His breath was knocked out of him, and for a moment he couldn't move, couldn't think. The world seemed to swirl around him. The black nylon bag that held the stolen crown was knocked from his seat and fell to the ground, its contents still hidden from view. For a moment, all he could hear was his own heavy breathing. His chest ached, and his head throbbed. But through the fog of pain, a thought broke through: he had to make sure the crown was still safe. He struggled to push himself up, his vision blurry from the impact, but he had to check the bag. As he reached under his seat and pulled the bag from its resting place, he heard someone groan. Kimi was lying on the floor near him, her face pale with pain. She had been thrown to the ground during the crash, but she was slowly starting to regain consciousness. Her eyes were wide with terror, and she seemed to be struggling to breathe. "Kwame," she gasped, her voice trembling. "What did you do? This is not right. I told you. This is because of the crown. Kwame is still dazed, barely heard her. His hands trembled as he opened the bag, his heart racing. But when he saw the crown inside, gleaming with its bright golden light, a sense of unease washed over him. It was still there, still perfectly intact. But it didn't bring him the joy he expected. Instead, it filled him with an icy chill. The crown, once a symbol of wealth and glory, now seemed like a dark omen. The weight of his actions, the theft, the lies, and the arrogance of thinking he could escape the village's ancient protections, all of it hit him in that moment. The consequences of his greed were now more real than ever. As the other corps members began to stir, the driver's voice cracked through the chaos. "Is everyone all right?" he called, his voice shaky. "Everyone stay calm, we need help." Kwame's mind was a swirl of confusion, pain, and guilt. The eerie quiet in the aftermath of the crash only seemed to intensify the tension. Something had gone terribly wrong, and no one could escape the terrible truth. The crown, once a beacon of his ambition, had sealed their fate.